to discuss issues of housing and the Nigerian economy and the advocacy for African architecture is Professor Nmadili Okwumabua, a cultural designer, urbanist and educator in African architecture and community planning. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you with this period, I mean, looking at what happened yesterday, the Queen of England is actually dead, and the news is beginning to settle in. How do you see the development across economies?
With her passing, first of all, I'd like to give condolences to her family and, of course, to her own nation. Taking a lead from her book, putting her people first, her nation first, focusing on all things that improve the lives of her citizens. I think we too here in Nigeria, our own politicians, taking a page from her book. I think that that's a great positive for us looking at the situation, even though, yes, she has passed away. Those kinds of things, yes, will improve our own economies, of course, in the building sector, which is my own area. Yes.
Okay. There's so much history when you look at it, and you are an advocate of preserving African architecture, right?
Yes.
That preserves heritage, identity, and environments. Can you tell us more about it?
Okay. So what CPDI Africa does, which is my organization, the Community Planning and Design Initiative Africa, we look at preserving our culture in the built environment. Creating architecture that is culturally sustainable and also environmentally sound, right? So that is looking at how we can use materials that are local to us, affordable, take those materials, standardize them, take that information into the classrooms, teach students so that we can come out and have materials that we can afford. It preserves our heritage. Not just the materials, how we actually use space. Aesthetics, spirituality, how our community actually develops society, community, all of those kinds of elements. That's what we kind of bring to the table so that we can see a more prosperous vision in our built environment.
Okay, you know, owning a standards and beautiful house in Nigeria is almost a dream. But how can we possibly achieve access to housing for everyone?
Access to housing for everyone. So once again, because we focus on heritage preservation, we like to look at how we did that in our communities in the past. Our houses did not cost us to build back in the day. When a young man comes of age, he's either going to be given land that he's inherited, or the chief can take him out and show him a place where you come and build. It wasn't about money. When it was time for him to build his house, he got family and friends to come and help him to build. It was sweat equity. The community engaged in developing, right? So taking a cue from that, housing is not really affordable when you start putting prices on it, right? So how do we bring that kind of traditional philosophy for providing land to community members? So you could say if you're living in your city, your village, or your state, policymakers should say, okay, so much amount of land is dedicated for real affordable housing. There's no cost attached to it, right? You give developers incentives to lower their costs in their building materials so that people can have. So it's building upon a traditional philosophy of actually providing for your citizens. Like we talked about the Queen just now. How did she provide for her citizens? It becomes our #1 priority to look for ways that nobody is left behind. People don't have to do very terrible things just to afford their rent or to afford a mortgage. When you know that as a citizen of the community, land is actually made available to you at certain levels. Yes.
Okay. So what role does the private sector, are we talking about private sector, public sector coming in here to make housing affordable for the ordinary citizen?
Yes, government should come in, like I said, and make certain amounts of, like if it's 20, 30% of the land in the city, no cost. And then when you're getting developers to, you know, produce those buildings, give them incentives so that if this house costs 10 million, for example, it will only cost 5 million because the government has subsidized some of it. So it is a public-private sector collaboration.
So now, the kind of housing you're advocating, is it compared to what we have today, the cost of average house, you know, is it minimal compared to what is obtainable today in the market?
Truly reduced.
Okay.
So the first
So
thing,
what are we looking at? Give us a picture. How much are we looking at?
Okay, so I would say easily for a well-finished 2 to 3 bedroom home, you're looking at about 5 million. But some of that cost has to be reduced. Again, cost of land has to be reduced. And the materials that we are using, we need to stop importing so much materials from abroad. It really increases the cost. How can we make our own materials standardized and invest in our own production company so that we're making our own, you know, materials? It will bring the cost down.
Okay, you talked about standardizing. How do we go about standardizing housing?
Okay, so taking a lot of the science and technology that our ancestors had already perfected, we knew how to use clay, adobe, laterite, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it mud. We knew how to make those blocks, whether they were sun-baked or dried. We all knew how to take that knowledge, bring it into the classroom, take it into the labs, and begin to come up with new patents. Some of this is already done by some people, and I'll have to talk about Dimas Wonko, Nigeria's own traditional African architect. He makes these blocks in Delta State. So that technology that he's already perfected, that should come to our classrooms. How do you standardize bamboo and timber using stone, local organic materials? So our students should be learning this in school. There should be research hubs, research labs, producing these standardized local materials.
So we have to incorporate it now in our curriculum.
Yes, the curriculums are very important. Okay. You can't have students going to school and looking at curriculums that were produced outside and then expect us to maintain. Again, coming back to the Queen of England, right? We use those curriculums, but how can we have Nigeria-centric curriculums?
Okay. So
yes.
what do you make of, recently we've been having building collapse here and there, different parts of the country. So what do you make of that? What do you think should be, how do we address this issue?
The first thing that comes to mind, everybody, it's corruption, right? You know, people might say greed. You are trying to use materials for the wrong size of buildings.
But again, there should be bodies that make sure that they stick to standard.
There are bodies, and a lot of those bodies are compromised. Yes, that's the first thing. Okay. But outside of that,
corruption, as you said.
Yes, I don't even focus on that. What I focus on is actually the skills that we should be using. Again, we didn't hear of buildings collapsing 100 years ago. We didn't, we didn't hear of town planners going to go and bulldoze estates because they built them in the wrong area. So if our buildings were not collapsing before, if we knew how to build and maintain, that's science and technology. There is indigenous knowledge that you know, post-colonization, post-independence, we really should be looking at that information and perfecting it. So that when we are building buildings, we are masters of that technology. It should not fall. We should know how to maintain it every so many years or things like that. That's kind of what we do at CPDI Africa.
Okay, but do you see a possibility of the rich, middle class, and the poor cohabiting in a place, let's say, like Abuja?
We're doing it now.
With the cost of, you know, housing.
We're doing it now, but just not maybe in the best way. In all of our estates, they're all levels. The rich are living with their relatives or their assistants, right? It's just a matter of architects and urban planners designing those estates or those neighborhoods very well. Mixed use, mixed income, it's very possible. And architecture is about beauty. So if those that are rich are concerned that the houses or the abodes of the less wealthy won't look good as they're coming into the neighborhood, then design them beautifully. It's aesthetics.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Where do you see the place of policy and advocacy in actualization of this? What African architecture you're actually pushing for?
One example that I like to give is Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, before an architect can even get his permit, his building permit to build, the planners have to see that they have incorporated some heritage preservation, they've incorporated some standardized local materials. If you cannot show that in your drawings, you don't get your building permit. So that's where policy comes in, right? That is our own lawmakers saying that it is important. We truly do want to address architecture, affordability, and we know that those who came before us had resolved a lot of this. So let's learn from them and take it to the next level, fast track it. But it's policy, it's all of us learning these things in our schools, having these conversations. So when you come out of school, you're on the same page.
Okay. You always advocate for occupants of a particular house to, kind of the architecture should reflect their own traditions.
Yes. Yes.
Can you? Are you planning one yourself?
Oh, of course. I have some amazing cultural architects that make up CPDI Africa. They are Hausa, they are Yoruba, they are Igbo, they are Ishekiri, they are all. And what they are assigned to do is to come up with these contemporary translations of their traditional architecture. So we hope very soon to roll out some designs that people will see and be truly proud of. When you talk about tourism and all that, people go to different locations to enjoy what they see and they take photographs. When they come to Nigeria, when they come to Africa, do they drive down the neighborhoods and stop and snap? Because what they're seeing is culturally relevant.
Of course.
It's heritage pride. So for so many reasons, not just for the tourism industry, for us, it would be nice for you to have a design that reflects your culture, what you love about your granddad's house, your dad's house. Put some of those elements into your home in the city. Your friends will come in and say, wow, this is beautiful, you know. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Professor Nmadili Okwumabua.
Yes.
I hope I got it right.
You're very close. Okwumabua.
Yeah. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Same here. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.